Urban renewal is defined as the clearing of slums in order to bring new development in the hopes of boosting economic prosperity. A process widely used across North America post-war, where the forgotten inner city had fallen into a state of disrepair. Urban renewal itself sounds like a good idea within the name. However, the actual redevelopments that took place wreaked havoc among strong and established communities and did little to make them safer as a whole. In the United States, it began with the 1949 Housing Act, where the government would provide municipalities with the funding to rip out existing housing and sell it to developers, usually under market value. Just like with most trends, Canada follows the USA very closely. Following World War II and the Great Depression, the social norm of city planning in Toronto was geared towards erecting new suburbs outside of the downtown and building new expressways to shuttle the businessmen into the central core. This, however, neglected the working-class neighborhoods closer to the center. These so-called slums were to be cleared out in way of shiny new development for the modern age, the first of which being one that is right behind me, Regent Park. The forgotten southern portion of Cabbagetown, Regent Park has always been a landing ground for new immigrants to the country. Following the Great Depression and a lack of investment from the city, this area fell into a major state of disrepair. But it was by no means beyond rehabilitation. However, the city had another plan in mind: rip out everything and start fresh. To quote York University's John Caulfield, Regent Park's implementation was autocratic and often brutal, and its construction seems to have been motivated as much by City Hall's concern to enhance Toronto as a locale for property investment by clearing slums, as by any benevolent interest in the housing needs of the city's less affluent. Basically meaning that the city was equally or more concerned on making a profit through real estate development rather than the living conditions of the city's poor. The NFB film Farewell Oak Street provides a slightly problematic and even propaganda-like view of a family whose lives are dogged by the reality of living on dilapidated old Oak Street, which sits just to my right, and then their lives start to better once they are relocated to the shiny new Regent Park. This enforces the notion that by only changing the housing situation of a citizen, the state could drastically change their entire social status. This holds some truth, as access to adequate housing does provide a sort of foundation for functioning in a modern society. However, we now know that that is only one of the building blocks needed to bring change and economic stability to a dilapidated neighborhood. The city of Toronto in the early 1950s believed that by bulldozing everything a community knew and replacing it with something shiny, that they could stimulate a sort of economic revitalization. However, this theory was completely incorrect. City planning-wise, once that portion of Cabbagetown South was raised, it took a lot of existing streets with it. What was once an interconnected neighborhood close to 3 major corridors of new shops and highly walkable streets became an isolated area closed off from the rest of the city. What isolation means for a district is less foot traffic, and this brings to one of the cornerstones of one of the failures of community housing across North America: safety and crime. There is a notion that highly suburbanized cities like Mississauga, Brampton, or the entire city of Los Angeles are more safe than the inner city where more dense neighborhoods exist. The idea is built around the theory that if there are less people walking down the street, there is less chance of you being the subject of a crime. However, this is completely false. In fact, it's quite the opposite. Let's take the example of Los Angeles, a city that is completely the opposite of dense. Everyone drives everywhere, and single-family homes reign supreme among kilometers upon kilometers of low-density suburbs cut apart by super expressways. The city is notorious for gang violence and violent crimes, and of course you can't link that directly to the fact that it's completely low-density urban sprawl, but there are some correlations. Let's look at a scenario. Let's say you are walking down a suburban street at night. Nobody's out, there's not even a sidewalk for you to walk on, so you have to walk on the side of the road. There are little street lamps, and nobody is sitting out on their porch or looking out in the window. Nobody else is walking down the street. You are completely alone. Once you think about it, this location becomes the perfect place for a violent criminal to strike. Regent Park is a case where there is a medium volume of residents. However, because the neighborhood is so disconnected from the rest of the city, it sees little to no foot traffic, bringing the same phenomenon. This is seen in public housing projects across North America. Quite soon after it was completed, Regent Park became known as a social disaster, even disliked by its own residents. As common in housing projects across North America, the quality of materials and the quality of construction were both very low. Regent Park became an isolated and unsafe district which nearly became what it swore to destroy. But there is hope. Only now are people realizing that the key to effective change within a city is not to blow everything up and then to start from scratch, but to provide residents with the means to revitalize their community from within. The perfect example of this is sitting right behind me. For the 2015 Pan Am Games, which Toronto hosted, the city began to build new infrastructure in the hopes of bringing economic change to dilapidated areas. This first came in the form of the Regent Park Aquatic Center, a massive indoor swimming pool complete with a water slide, and best of all, since it's a city-run building, it's completely free. Revitalization should not be about bringing in developers in order to boost economic prosperity in a neighborhood. It should be about providing adequate social services for a community in order to give them the building blocks that they need to provide their own social and economic stability. This is done by access to good parks, good schools, and community centers like the one right behind me. And even so, suburban sprawl continues to ring most major cities, even today, and continues to grow almost exponentially. Once again, we find ourselves back at the notion that the key to having a functional city is the one word: community. City planners and theorists even today fail to realize that the city is not built for the individual. The city will not function if it is built for the individual. The city is meant to be built for the collective.